All right. Hey guys, this is not a HeroClix podcast. Just fair warning, I'm going to talk about politics, religion, maybe gender, but mainly politics and religion. So, if you're like, don't want to hear Dark Logos' views on politics and religion, fine. Just shuffle on. That's cool. See you next episode. There's an episode of Starting Over Podcast that should be up for this week. Okay. Also, hopefully you like the April Fool's show. But yeah, this is completely different. Now, you might ask yourself, why are we going to get a show or this little episode on politics and religion and all this other stuff? Okay. Mainly what ended up happening is we all know Gen Con stand against the Indiana law, which I think is stupid for various reasons, not necessarily for what everyone is arguing for. Okay. But here's the thing. I end up, pointing out, I'm like, the World Championships of HeroClix, and I said this in the HeroClix Around the World forum. And I said this, like, what does this have to do with HeroClix? HeroClix is, the World Championships aren't at Gen Con anymore. And on top of that, them not being at Gen Con anymore, we're looking at a situation of why is anybody really going to show up to Gen Con to play HeroClix? Really, like, if you're going to go to Gen Con, you're better off going somewhere else. So some people chimed in and made some very aggressive statements about people who are in support of the Indiana law, as it was written in March. Okay, March 2015. Okay, so, because I don't know, somebody might be going back through time. It was like, what Indiana law? Anyway, but so I came back and I said, hey, I just recently, like literally the time this came out, I had my basic denominational certification to do ministry, not marry people, but just to do like maybe chaplaincy certification and then preach in my denomination, like to get paid sort of sense. I got my lowest level certification. I just said, hey, there's a lot more behind this. And that if people have moral disagreements, like myself, to gay marriage and whatever else, then that can put us in a very tough situation. And I wouldn't want to violate, my freedom of religion to do something I disagree with. And then this guy comes back and calls me a bigot. And then says that my denomination was, that I probably been part of a denomination that banned black people. Like that's, like it's supposed to be like a direct slam against me. And then I asked him, I was like, just look up the word bigoted, and then we can do that right here and now. And just type in the word bigoted into Google, or bigot. And it's a person who is intolerant toward holding different opinions, those holding different opinions. Okay. I didn't personally attack anyone, but simply, a bigot can be liberal, a bigot can be conservative, a bigot can be moderate, a bigot can be a person who is pro-meta and hardcore HeroClix and anti-meta hardcore HeroClix. It's just having a grand intolerance to a view. And so a lot of folks will believe that liberalism cannot be bigoted, but liberalism can be bigoted. Just as conservatism is many times painted as bigoted, but it also could not be bigoted as well. It is mainly based on if you are tolerant to a person's view. Now, then you're coming into what is the definition of tolerant or intolerant, and what are the actions of someone that is tolerant and intolerant. And I would just go on as far to say that if a person is tolerant, means that they allow the other individual to hold their views without coercion, not necessarily taking actions to support their views. Okay? And here's where this becomes a huge element. If I say, hey, I really don't like casual play hero clicks, but I understand people that do, and I'm not really going to force hardcore hero clicks all the time. Does that mean for me to hold my view that I am being tolerant, that I must go out there and plan lots and lots of casual tournaments? No. Same thing. If I'm not for gay marriage, okay, does that mean that I must go in and support it? No. Does that mean that I can step away from the issue and say, hey, I don't want to be involved in any way, shape, or form? Yes. And that's part of the issue. And that's the tough part. So going in, you might ask, well, Dark Logos, what's your view on gay marriage? Well, clearly I don't believe in gay marriage, but at the same time, I don't think marriage should be tied to the state at all. It was used as an easy way in the past to make it so that a person would have legal rights to properties and access. That's really it. The relationship element of marriage in our modern society, it's not necessarily bogged down, but you really could get most of the rights of a married person without being married to the person. And here's a prime example that most people don't know and that the media will portray as, oh my gosh, the discriminations. A homosexual couple is together. One of them is struck by a meteor. The other one is fine. The one is taken to the hospital, and then they're like, well, who's family? Okay. And then the homosexual guy's like, well, that's my life partner or whatever. Most hospitals would let the guy through. Let's just say they didn't. It was like, no, we're not letting you through. You're not a blood relative. Okay, cool. The person that was hit, if they had an advance directive, they would say, I want all my medical things determined by Bob. And let's just say Bob's a domestic partner. Then yeah, the hospital has to comply, or else Bob can sue the pants and the shirt and the fancy equipment off of that hospital, because that's a legally binding document. Okay, if the advance directive says I want these people to know and these people not to know, then guess what? Those people don't have a right to know, and the other people that do have a right to know, or else the hospital will be sued. Pure and simple. Getting insurance, you can have it for a domestic partner however you want to define it. You don't even have to have sex with a person to be the domestic partner. If you're like, you know what, I like my best friend Bob, we are both two heterosexual men, but you know what, he's my life partner in a non-sexual way. We just do everything together. We live together. He takes care of me. You know, if you want to go do the bros before hoes thing, okay, cool. And we are down with each other. We are support each other 100%. I want him to make my medical decisions, not some chick I'm shacking up with. You just write your advance directive, and you can even go in and say, like, you know, Bob's my life partner. There's no demand that sex is involved. You really just say, like, I just want this person in charge. That's it. You write your will. Boom. I can leave all of my money to a cat if I want to, and set up a foundation to take care of my cat if I had a cat. Okay. If I am on day 2 of being uncle. If I wanted to set up all of my property when I die to be left to my nephew, boom, done. My brother, my mom, whoever my girlfriend is, you know, if I have one at the time, can't do jack. It's legally binding. Okay. So a lot of this, when it comes to gay rights, it's really about social acceptance, which the state doesn't have a right to force upon me. to accept whatever. Just like I am not forced to accept, Greek mythology as a religious viewpoint, even though there's some that hold to it still. I don't have to. If someone comes to me and it's like, I worship the Greco pantheon, I'm like, cool, you can go do that. I'll be over here. Okay. But I'm not forced to interact and, offer up my rituals before images of stone. At the same time, I don't expect someone of a different worldview or theological metaphysics view to uphold to how I perceive the universe and even, look at the evidences that I use to substantiate my viewpoint. Really don't. I don't hold it against them. I had a friend when I was kicked out of seminary, and that's a whole long story. At one period of time, I did finish seminary though. Just let people know I got kicked out of seminary at a period of time. And we talked about science stuff and then found out, he's an atheist. And the friendship lasted for a while until he got uncomfortable with the dynamic tension for the fact that he was throwing stuff at me and I sort of called BS on some of his arguments. And he called BS on some of mine. And at the other end, I said, hey, you know what? I don't know to his questions. I'll try to find out. But if I can't find out, I just don't know. Doesn't necessarily mean there isn't an answer. And sometimes he would give me that luxury. Sometimes he would not. But really what it came down to is he had a problem interacting with a person that, in spite of all the evidences that convinced him, it didn't convince me. He had a crisis of, I believe he had a crisis of individual personhood, in that my existence threatened who he was tied to as a person, because I sort of defied a lot of his tropes of what a Christian is and what a intellectual is and what a thinker is. Because he said, Edward, doesn't make sense. You're so smart. Why aren't you an atheist? And I'm be like, brains has nothing to do with it completely. But anyway, the same thing that ends up happening, we find out that ideas, the main reason they tell you don't talk about politics and religion is that when they scan your brain, the part of the brain that fires off when it comes to ideas and religion is the same part of the brain that comes in with your identity of self. It is literally reason why you feel uncomfortable it's like a pain body that's right in that region too. It feels like a actual physical threat, even though there is no immediate physical threat with the exchange of words. And that's why people get so heated about politics and religion most of the time. And they'll say, forget you, kill you, F you, forget that, all these other things. And they'll be very mean-spirited about it. Okay. Sort of going into the law element and just giving you some background. Why a lot of, you could say, monotheistic, you could say Christians or even just purely monotheistic people don't agree with the law or whatever else. Some of it's like, well, the cake baker and the candlestick maker and the photographer and all those guys. And the people doing for-profit chaplaincy. And yeah, I could sort of see how I understand how that becomes a big issue. And here's why. If someone asked me to do something in my job that would violate my religious freedom because they're throwing money at me, that would say easily that my metaphysical ideas could be bought and sold. That they are that cheap because you're throwing money at me, I'm willing to forfeit my beliefs. I could easily say, like, hey, I go to a bakery. They are pro-gay marriage. And I'd be like, hey, I want you to make me a cake that just says, hey, pro-traditional marriage. It's a wonderful thing. And if they refuse me service, and I could say, hey, they refuse me service, which there is an instance of that happening. I saw a guy pretty much do this, and the pro-gay bakeries refused him service, which legally they can't do, but the guy sort of let it slide. He proved his point, but he's letting it slide. But am I going to give that bakery, grace? Yeah. Okay, cool. You don't agree with me? Fine. I'm going to go over someplace else. Okay, I'm not going to, do business with you, and that's fine. You have plenty of other customers. But cool. I know where your money's going. You know where my money is going. We don't have to support what we don't believe in. And money shouldn't force me to throw away my ideals. For a chaplain end of it is a lot more complicated, because it took me 5 years to get my MDiv. Really like 4.5 to get my MDiv, which is long, but I didn't take like 18 hours. And if anyone took 18 hours during grad school, props to you, because you could handle that stress. I couldn't do that. I did like 4 classes a semester. So it took me a little bit longer, plus summer school. But what ended up happening is I've spent a good chunk of money on my MDiv. Plus, adding the fact that you're really not making a lot of money off of your MDiv unless you make it big as a minister or on the circuit or write a book or something else like that. Okay. You get into a denomination, you have to go through at least another 3 to 4 years at minimum of interactions to get your licensure certification. For me, getting my certification, it took me 2 years to get to the point of doing marriages. You have to be ordained in just about all the 50 states in the United States. You have to be ordained to get your to do marriage. Okay, so you're talking about 4 to 6 to 8 years for United Methodists. And one reason I didn't join them, even though I had to have a pretty decent history with them previously, is that was 8 years. And I was going to start in year 1 in like 2012. And I was like, forget that. That's just too long. And that's before you can do anything. And I was like, by that time I could be in another church and in 4 years be ordained, which is sort of what I'm shooting for now. Okay. And it's big economic issues, because you can't without endorsement from your denomination, you cannot, or a religious body, you cannot do chaplaincy training, which you need to get certification to get chaplaincy job, which your first unit of chaplaincy training, you may or may not be paying for. Many times you are paying for, and it can go up to like $1,000. And a lot of people will say, well, that's not big of a deal. But yeah, it is a big of a deal, considering that if you have a master's degree, you're stacking that fee on top of that. Then you take it a step further as your time that you're spending in class for your first unit. And then your second unit, you have your residency, and you're making like $25,000 to $30,000 in your residency, which is a joke. And that's what it is in the middle of the United States. On the coast, it might be a little bit more, but you're also talking about higher cost of living. Okay, so you're barely getting by. You're not even really paying down those student loans too much. Okay. So Sally Mae is slapping your butt left and right and telling you to go make it a sandwich every day. Okay. Because they're capitalizing and compounding the interest daily. That's the one thing they don't tell you. They compound that 1% and 2% every day. So anyway, sort of, just maneuvering on. So you've invested just to be a chaplain or to work in, wherever you're at. In a hospital, you've at least invested eight years of your life in this. If you're doing marriage, it's 8 to 12 years of your life, to get into your profession for not that much pay, unless you live in Vegas. Really not that much pay. Okay. Cake makers, y'all, and wedding photographers, it depends on if you went to art school and culinary school and how much time and money that went into that. And again, some people might be saying this is tedious, but I really want you to understand like the background of why this is a big money issue. So a gay couple comes to me, and I'm working in a chapel. There's a couple of like major problems. If I say, okay, I've only served Christians in this chapel, I'm sort of good. Okay. And then if I even go on and say, hey, you have to go through marriage counseling and have proof of marriage counseling before I go through and marry you. Okay, that's another thing. But if you live in Vegas, you're just slapping a stamp half the time and doing I call it a fall ritual. It's not a real ritual. It's just stupid. Anyway, definitely if the people are drunk. I don't know. I guess I have a bias against Vegas. Yay, my bigotry comes in. But going on. If this couple comes in, it's like, hey, I want you to marry us. If you're not under a bigger church where they have bylaws to protect you, because I mean you need those bylaws, or if you're pretty much non-denominational or a religious person, you are in trouble. You're in so much trouble. And here's why. If you do the wedding and it gets back to your denomination, you're going to get reprimanded. If you do it again, you're definitely going to get put on suspension and your credentials could be revoked. If they have a stance that, hey, we do not support gay marriage. It's not an issue of monogamy. It's an issue of sin. Okay. Then if you do it for a third time, you could be kicked out your denomination. And then you're talking about starting the ordination process in another denomination. That's again, 4 years. What are you going to be doing in that meantime for income in that 4 years? All right. Let's say you don't do it. They sue the pants off of you and take your business. Okay. So what are you going to do for income? So I'm just saying it's not as clean cut. They're like, yay, gay rights. But it's like, hold up, wait. Is there a way for me to maintain my religious faith in the midst of this? So the co-op is, I see in the future, is that the liberal Christian guy and the liberal Christian denominations will see an explosion of business, and the conservative ones will not. They'll see a decline. Because there's those people that'll just be like, on principle, I'm not going to go there. And that is fine. I've said it in the past. I've stopped doing business with a company that I invested a lot of money in. A game that I spent a lot of money in is Alltel. And it was fun. It was great. I was an influencer. I was a bigger person there in Alltel than I am in HeroClix. Okay. I mean, literally, like I was the man. And I left just because the company that I was investing all this money into produced pornography. They sold and produced pornography. I'm morally against that, so I don't do business with them. Now, you're probably going to say in the comments, but Dark Logos, these people do this and these other things do that. Okay, the moment that I find that out and I'm aware of it, I stop doing business with them. But then you say, well, Dark Logos, doesn't that make life hard? Yes, but I value my ethics and morals more. I'm making this partially for me, but more for you all to understand where I sit. So if you want to make a economic decision or a time decision not to listen to any product that I put out, that is fine. You at least know where I stand. I'm probably like the only conservative HeroClix podcaster. Actually, yeah, I probably am. Anyway, sort of going back, I've looked at a whole lot of different things, and the biggest issue with the law is, you might say like, hey, Edward, it sounds like you're pro this law. I'm like, no, I'm not. And I said the biggest issue with this law is that anyone could discriminate on anything based on their religious reasons and not necessarily have it in writing, or even have their religious text to prove that they believe this, or that it's a tenet of their faith. There's no burden of proof. Okay, there's no burden of proof, and I would hate to be the lawyer that would have to have, a lawyer, not a lawyer, the judge that would also have to have a religious studies degree to handle this type of law, because look at it like this: if a person just said it's against my religious beliefs as a Muslim that I don't serve Jews or Christians, or I only serve Muslims. Okay, if you're in a predominantly Muslim community, your business isn't going to be screwed, really. Okay. Now, if you're in downtown San Francisco, you're screwed. Okay. You're screwed. Let's just be honest. Let's just say if it was universal for a moment, you're screwed. You're not going to make any money. Okay. You picked a bad location to have that ideal. Okay. But this law would just pretty much say, hey, it's against my religion for people to come in with shoes. I'm not going to serve you. It's against my religion for women to come in with shirts. It's against my religion. You can't come in here. And so it becomes a problem. Even if you said it's against my religion for men to come into this place with pants. It's a sacred space. You have to take your pants off. And you just see this woman with a video camera just looking at dudes. Like, it's just as creepy as, the old guy with the cameras all over the place telling, it's against my religion for the woman to take her top off. Okay. You're not going to do business except, a very niche group of people. And then who knows, you might be able to make more money. But it's really open-ended. And here's the main problem that I dislike with the narrative that's going around this whole bill thing, is that everyone said this is about gay people and cake and photos. It's really what it's about. It's gay people and cake and photos. And we can get super pissed off about gay people not getting cake and photos from a very select group of people. And I'm like, okay. But we completely ignored the fact that any ideological group can say to any other ideological group, no, I'm not, based off of religious convictions. Even so much so, a religious conviction can also include humanism and atheism and pantheism. And they could easily say Christians are destructive to the environment and to this country. The fewer amounts of them there is, the better for the universe as a whole. I'm not going to give them services. Real simple. This is why it's stupid. But I've heard two people, and all my commentary that I've read up on it, have even brought this up. Two people, because the social narrative is, oh my gosh, the gays. And that's really what it's blown up to. Oh my gosh, the gays. And you might say, well, I'm trivializing it. To an extent, because it's trivialized because the whole scope of the issue, of how it's worded, is not looked at. It is the new pet project that's on the spearhead of whoever's agenda. Oh, gay rights. Yay. Forced acceptance. Yay. Cool. All right. This is what we're going to do. Instead of saying, all right, hey, this is the whole scope of the issue. It touches 15 different areas. These all are bad. These all are bad. And then someone will say, well, hey, Edward, if someone denies, the gay person, life-saving services, I'm be like, yeah, that's horrible. That's real horrible. But at the same time, someone can deny me life-saving services because I'm a Christian under the law too. So which is worse? And here's where I sort of come into is whatever you give priority to in your philosophy is what comes out first. Sort of see where it comes down to? So even beyond it being an egalitarian element It is the main social agenda is to make sure that homosexuality is seen as normative. That's it. So there's whole other things that come into that. And so you go really, there's a lot, such as social engineering. And then the question comes in is who's doing the engineering? And then whoever does social engineering impacts your culture. And so technically, to an extent, and this sounds bad, they are your master. They create the groupthink for everybody to operate in. Really do, because a lot of people don't think things through. We do rely on other individuals to fill in the gaps of our expertise, and then we lean on them to think for us. But when it definitely comes to ideas of government, personhood, sexuality, and whatnot, then we should go through and look at some evidence and look at like, maybe this isn't good. Maybe there could be problems. Okay, things that I thought were problems, they didn't have as big of problems as I thought when the evidence came out. Okay, these things over here, oh gosh, I didn't even know that this would happen. Just like in government, there's tons of unintended consequences. Tons. Okay. And then you go and you look at the narrative, and this is another element that I had a problem with. The narrative by the left right now is shaming. It's shaming. And that's really the most of it. It's like a lot of the attacks that I saw on CNN why isn't it loving your neighbor by giving them photos and cakes and other stuff? Isn't it love your neighbor to accept gay marriage? I'm like, hold up, what? Wait, what? What does loving my neighbor having to do with me accepting gay marriage? What the heck? It's just like saying I don't love my child because I discipline them. Or I don't love my child because I disagree with them. Or I don't love my neighbor because we have two different political views. Or I don't love my neighbor because he likes chocolate and I like strawberry ice cream. It's like, okay, and you can start to see how farcical it is. And even more so, I listen to a gentleman named Ravi Zacharias, and he is a Christian apologist, and he allows me to sort of go through faith logically, and I go step by step with him. And sometimes I fully agree with him, and sometimes the nuance of what he says I sort of tweak in my own head. But what he says is that once you start taking a philosophical concept away from its foundations, it becomes an idea suspended in thin air that will not stand. If you take the command, love thy neighbor as thyself, away from the first commandment within Christianity and even within Judaism from Hillel, because Hillel is the origins of the two commandments. Anyway, that's a whole different other subject, but which is love your God, love Yahweh with all your heart, your soul, mind, and strength. And from the first commandment, you are able to do the second commandment. If you take away the first commandment and you fully look at the second and you take it out of the context and the background that's in it, then it becomes an idea suspended in thin air. And then when you don't even understand the concept, then you start having the other concepts is what is love? Where does love come from? Is love a choice? Is love an emotional response? And then you sort of, it just dies. It becomes this, whatever I want to warp it into, I warp it into. And so it's a lot of lazy theology, and Don Lemon definitely is not a theologian. So anyway, for most people, you'll listen to this and it's like, okay, you're not saying burn gays at the stake, and at the same time you're not saying that this law is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Okay, so what do you support? Technically, I think overall, it's a tough road. It's a tough road. And for most Christians don't know Christian history, this isn't the first time we've been in, as a religion, in this situation. A lot of people I even talked to at work said, all that happened in Christianity was a bunch of people that tried to get power over other people. And I was like, do you even know the first 100, 200 years of Christianity? It really wasn't like that. It really wasn't until Constantine that there was any sort of state power. And even then, there were arguments between theologians to beware the power of tying Christianity to the state, and that then we would be holding more to Caesar than to God. And the others that felt that having the power of the state was God giving us freedom from persecution, and that it was necessary. Like there is tons of religious political theory and early church history. And when you're talking about people being burned at the stakes, and you're like, well, you did it to the witches. Okay, cool. Touche. Da-dum-dum. Okay, but you're talking about people burnt at the stakes. You talk about being fed to lions. You're talking about being killed. Heck, Paul went out to go kill Christians. It's not a religion that you join because you want to rule over people. That would be completely dumb. Definitely in early Christianity. And really not until maybe 500, 600 AD, when the papacy was a lot stronger and Rome wasn't being sacked every 5 seconds, and you had somewhat of a Byzantine empire. But even then, it's not the main thing. Like, oh yes, I'm going to become very powerful. No, because you still had monastic movement, and the monastic movement is what most people would join. You would have very little money and very little property, if any. So again, to get off and control people, it's really not there. There is a understanding of seeing something greater. So because folks don't understand church history, they never taught it because their pastor probably never went to seminary, or the pastor slept through church history, or their seminary didn't teach church history worth a darn. They're not going to know this. They're not, and the most adherent, average adherent, isn't going to go read up on church history because they're too busy doing whatever else. And so it's going to look at it like a new problem. And the answer in the past was, yep, you suffer through it. You don't have money. Oh, you don't have as much profits. Oh, things become difficult. Oh, you do suffer for Christ's sake. Oh my gosh, life becomes hard and I can't conveniently be accepted and loved by everyone. Well, yeah. Cool. Doesn't mean you stop dialoguing with people. Doesn't mean you stop loving your neighbor in spite of everything else. Again, I can be patient. I can be kind. I don't boast myself. Be there in a capacity of giving my all in spite of. The 1 Corinthians 13 chapter at the end, or near the middle, describes the Christian view of love, of where you would come back to love your neighbor as yourself would be epitomized as, not necessarily erge or sterge, or even philia or phileo. So anyway, I've dealt with it, and I'll give a background of something that happened to me when I was in high school, and then I'll sort of close it off and just end it there. When I was in high school, I was known as Preacher Man. Big whoop, big surprise. And I did speech and debate. And I mean, you can sort of tell by how I structure things and how I lead things in and whatnot. Okay. Speech and debate is not a place, even in the Midwest, that is full of conservative minds. It is definitely not. And I was a minority, and even more of a minority. I was a minority because I was open about my faith. I was also a Protestant in a Catholic school that was open, and I was openly pro-Protestant. and so that also allowed me to have to debate out and think out why I believed what I believed. But what ended up happening is I had two very strong encounters in speech and debate. And this is the realm of tolerance and liberalism and all this other stuff. You might say they're kids, but we deal with philosophical concepts. We know what this stuff means. We're not stupid. Okay. No one that I interacted with was stupid. One guy came up to me and said, sort of along the lines, and I'm just going to paraphrase this. You're Edward Preacher Man Shelton. Yeah, that's me. It says it on my freaking Letterman jacket. I'm not hard to find. Okay. And they're like, so if I held your family captive and I told you that you had to have sex with this very attractive woman, or I would kill your family, or I would kill you, what would you do? Pray and prepare to die. It's like, but it's just sex with the woman. And it's like, and you would have me defile myself for what? But you just go have sex with this woman. Yeah, but I value my God more. Okay. And so it sort of blew that guy's mind. And even more so when he kept giving me these more and more scenarios. I'm just like, I'm going to choose God. 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 Why are you even asking me this? He then pretty much, called me a pussy and said that, I was an ideologue, even though I intellectually explained out, why I wouldn't do what I did. Why I wouldn't do what he was proposing. But I was an ideologue. I was a bigot. I was small-minded. I was in the chains of oppressive, patriarchal, this, that, and yabber jabber. So, because he couldn't get me to compromise what I believe, he began to shame me and try to make fun of me and make me look like a small person in front of everybody else. Same thing, similar situation. This one was a little bit more interesting. It was a woman, it was a young white girl this time, and I specifically remember she was pregnant, and brown hair. It's amazing things that you remember when you really try to look back in the crevices of your mind. Can't see her face clearly, but I can, her hair, her being pregnant, and her being white, and there's some other element, her height, sort of, 5'5", 5'4", 5'5", somewhere around there. Ended up coming at me and was saying okay, so you're a Christian. Well, what about abortion? What about, if I wanted to have an abortion, what about my right to have that? And part of me wanted to say, well, you're pregnant right now. Are you considering this? And that's the more aged me sort of coming back, looking at that situation. I was like, are you considering this for real? Are you asking my opinion for real? Instead of just trying to put me in some situation where what I am going to say so you can try to embarrass me in front of everybody else. But she pretty much, went on this tirade about abortion and about, sexuality and religion oppressing women and this, that, and the other, and not allowing women to be sexually free and this, that, and the other. And I just sat there and just listened and sort of just took it. And because I already knew at that stage, I'm like, all right, this isn't a dialogue. This isn't this isn't a dialogue. This is a monologue. This is you picking on me because you can. And so I just sit back and I listen to everything, and I was like, you know what? It seems like you're in a tough situation. Do you mind if I pray for you? She looked at me in disgust and said I was a joke and walked away. So, I mean, I've had more experiences than that. Some good, some bad with liberalism, and good and bad dealing with conservatism too. So, you know, I'm not necessarily like, oh, the tragedy of these things, and then it's scarred my soul forever. But I really, really want folks to understand that there are no white knights in all of this. That there is no pure, clean side. That people's hands are marred with blood, and that there is no inclusion. There is no perfect inclusion. Eventually, people pick sides, and in picking sides, it creates tension. Now, how that tension is held dictates the tone of a society. It really does. If I say, hey, I disagree and with you, and how I'm going to handle that is us not looking at the actual statistics and who's doing the statistics and why they're doing the statistics, because that stuff matters too. What is the definition of the terms? Why are the words defined that way? Because that matters a lot. It's like the core elements of reason and debate, which freaking journalism ignores. Okay. And yes, I do have journalism experience, because hell, I was the first black editor-in-chief of my newspaper in college. And I did I did journalism stuff in high school and in college and in grad school. And heck, I still am a journalist now, to lesser extent. Where's your source? Where's your burden of proof? Everything you have to prove. If not, is it theory? Is it philosophy? Is it ideal? When it comes down to your societal implication, is this theory? Is it philosophy? Is it ideal? Where's your statistics of this working? So even if we go forward and say, hey, Christian guy, you have to put gay marriage is great on the cake, then at the same time, if I go to another baker and says, hey, traditional marriage is great, the law needs to enforce equally. The society needs to respond in kind and say, hey, you know, the gay guy that's turning it down for me writing traditional marriage is great is just as foul as the guy that won't. You see? And that's not where we're at. Not where we're at. Because the ideal is wrapped up in hidden behind protected groups. And I'm not going to front. Sometimes being black, I get a benefit of that. Most of the time, I don't. The rare times I do, I sort of sit back and wonder, I'm like, this doesn't sit right. I'm getting benefits just because I'm black. This is going to bite me back later on, because someone's going to say, hey, you're in this place because we put you here. Not because I earned my place there, or that I belong there, or I deserve to be there, but because someone put me in that place. And so then they are entitled to, you know, access to my endorsement. So anyway, thanks for listening. Again, if you disagree with me, you can email me at staringoverpodcast@gmail.com. And you can just be like, hey, Edward, I disagree with you. You can keep it civil. That's fine. If you want me to respond back to you, let me know. If you're like, I'm not going to consume any of your products anymore, that's fine. If you let me know that, you state why, I would appreciate it. If not, you have no obligation. If you're like, hey, you know, so what's your solution on the marriage thing? Just take marriage out the state. And I just say, hey, whoever gets my stuff, and whoever can take care of me medically, this is who this list of people are. Everybody else, GTFO. Real simple solution. And then marriage just becomes a religious right. And then, for people who say, hey, religion and the state doesn't mix in the United States in the sense of clergy are not agents of the state. and are not held to the bounds of the state. Military chaplains can't say in the name of Jesus due to regulation. If they do, they can get reprimanded if it's in a public event. And they almost got to the point where it's in the personal meetings as well. And then a chaplain that's ordained pays their fees and stuff for their licensure in the state. And if they do a wedding, it's legally binding. And they have to do the paperwork and turn it into the state. So if you're like, nah, state and religion should never mix, you're delusional. You're delusional because you've never really looked at how state and religion mixes and how state interacts with religion. We don't have state promoted religion, but we do have religion and the state interacting. The state can dictate what I can and cannot say in a pulpit. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that. The state can dictate, and I was going to wrap it up, but just real quick. I cannot endorse a candidate from the pulpit. I can talk about laws, but I can't tell anybody this is what you should vote on. Okay. Pure and simple. Those are two clear-cut examples that if you violate those, the state will be on you hella fast, and you could possibly serve jail time. Possibly. There's issues, but yeah, that's a big violation. You can't say like, hey, everybody, we should vote for Tim. He's a member of our church body, and he holds to this, and this. You can say, hey, Tim's on the ballot. Just letting everybody know. You can do that, but you can't tell people to vote for Tim. You can't tell people to vote for laws. You could say, this is on the ballot. Here's what it means in our worldview. But you can't tell people to vote for anything. And the stuff that happened in Texas, where it was trying to get anything that says it's against homosexuality as hate speech, yeah, that one, if that one went over, that would have been a big infringement of the state infringing on the realm of religion. But it's happening more and more. So as we become a more secular society, I expect it to happen a lot more. So that's it. If you enjoyed it, I'm probably not going to make this a regular staple. Actually, I'm not going to make it a regular staple. It's going to be a long time, unless some other really big shenanigans come out and it affects, and I deal with it in freaking HeroClix around the world or freaking other HeroClix sub chats or something. But even then, I'm just, letting it go. All right. Thanks for listening, and have a good rest of your day.